Hello and welcome to an interview with Dr. Holly Bick and Dr. Virginia Schutte, who are currently on a boat in the middle of the ocean. I want to give a quick shout out to Science Mom Amber watching from West Virginia. I see we have Rebecca. Hello to the Kinsey family watching from Maryland, to Seth watching in Las Vegas. And without further ado, I'm going to bring on Dr. Holly Bick and Virginia Schutte. Hello.
Hi.
To start off with, I would love to have both of you just tell me, how did you get to be on a boat in Antarctica doing scientific research? What's your background, just real quick?
So I'm Holly Bick. I'm a faculty member at the University of Georgia. I'm a professor there, and to get on this boat, I essentially wrote a grant to the National Science Foundation asking for money and permission to get onto this research vessel, and they happily said yes. I proposed some very exciting research questions and a sampling plan about the sites that I wanted to sample, and that's essentially, once they said yes, we started the wheels in motion to get on the boat. And that was about 2 years ago, actually, that I started that process.
And I'm Virginia Schutte. I am a marine biologist. My own research has nothing to do with this big ship and the deep sea and Antarctica. I chased fish through the tropics with a camera, trying to figure out where they live and why they like it there and what we can do to help them out. But I guess I like the camera part a little more than the science part, because now I make stuff for the internet that connects people with science that other people are doing. So Holly and I met on a different research vessel a couple years ago. And when she realized that she was going to go on this one, she said, "Do you want to lead some of the stuff like this?" And I said, "Yes, please, bring me along." So I am here to take photos, to make videos, and do stuff like this that helps bring people along with what we're doing.
Yay for science communication. That's great. Now, when you and I have to say, I found out about this because Virginia told me about it. And when Virginia first told me that there was a scientist studying worms in Antarctica, I was immediately very intrigued. So tell us a little bit about what type of worms you're studying, Holly, and where are they in Antarctica? Isn't it too cold for worms down there?
That's a good question. So, yeah, on this boat, there's actually 31 scientists studying different types of worms, if you can imagine that. So, there are so many different groups of worms. I study one particular group called nematodes, which are roundworms. And the nematode, which most people know about, is actually dog heartworm. So the reason you go to your vet and you give your dog heartworm pills is to prevent an infection of parasitic nematodes, parasitic roundworms. And so I don't study those. I study the ones that live in the ocean bottom. And those are not parasitic. They are free living. They just happily hang out in the mud. There are thousands of worms for every handful of mud that you would pick up pretty much anywhere on Earth, including the deep sea. And we don't know the species that are there. So I'm just generally interested in discovering new worms and figuring out how they're related to other worms in other parts of the Earth.
That is amazing that there are thousands of nematodes in mud pretty much anywhere. So how big are they? Are we talking about like speck of dust, size of a sand grain?
They are on average the speck of a speck of dust. If you picture like a glass coffee table in a room that's been shut up for a while, they look like, to the naked eye, they look like little individual specks of dust on that. So scientifically, they range from 1/10 of a millimeter up to 3 millimeters or so. But so up to kind of a piece of thread that's maybe as long as your two fingers, like that. But usually we need microscopes to see them, so they're very tiny.
I'm going to interrupt for a second and just put in a plug for how cool the technology is that Holly uses to study these worms. So you think about microscopes and you think drop of water and I can't see what's in it, right? They're much bigger than that because you can see the little specks, but they're also too small to just do with your naked eye. So Holly has to do an in-between thing that doesn't squash them too much since they're round. And so we talk about them being at the limits of what technology can study. So sparkles and glow for what Holly knows how to do. It's amazing.
Yeah, so we use traditional techniques like microscopes to look at them, but we also use really high throughput, cutting edge genomic technology. So we do PCR and we do DNA sequencing, and then we get the genomes of these worms. So we can compare them both under the microscope, how they look like other worms, but also how their DNA compares to other worm species.
And we're going to do a tour of the ship in just a minute. But before we do, I just want to ask, why do people care about worms living at the bottom of the ocean in mud?
That was my question too. I was like, wait, but why do we care about this?
Yeah. So, I mean, first of all, worms are awesome. So anyone who thinks otherwise, I need to talk to you. They are really just beautiful. If you look at them under the microscope, they are not boring. They're not slimy. They actually have all these hairs on them. They have ridges. They have these circular pores called amphids, and they actually look like Princess Leia buns, like on either side of the head of the worm. And they have like giant teeth and jaws. That some roundworms eat other worms. Some feed on bacteria. So, just from a visual perspective, they're really beautiful. But from a scientific perspective, they're also really important because there are thousands in every handful of mud, and they do things like cycle carbon and break down nutrients. And from a global perspective, they're really important in they kind of sort of act like your compost pile in decomposing things and making it available for bigger things.
And are there worms just in the ocean mud around Antarctica, or would you also find nematodes in the soil in Antarctica too, like under the ice? Do they live everywhere?
They live everywhere, pretty much, including in your drinking water sometimes.
I don't think about those very much.
No, don't think about it. Don't think about it. Yeah, so they live in the mud on the seafloor. They also live in ice channels. So there are channels in sea ice. When sea ice melts a little bit, it gets slushy and it forms a brine. And you actually have special worms that live in the icebergs themselves. You also have roundworms that live in the dry valleys of Antarctica on land, and they eat specialized bacteria. So pretty much everywhere on Earth you would find worms, even including in volcano soils that are heated by geothermal energy. So I'm literally not kidding when I say they are absolutely everywhere you could look.
That is amazing. Now, give us a little bit of a tour of the ship. I'm going to give both of you the full screen. I would love to just see the ship and have you tell us, how does the research actually work? How are you going to get these worms?
Okay, so this is Virginia. I'm behind the camera now. I'm going to show you where we're starting. That's Holly. We are in one of the rooms that is next to outside and inside. So it's nice and quiet for talking to y'all. There's a lot of equipment storage in here right now that will come out in a second. Holly, I'm going to ask you to go that way so we can see some of the stuff that we use to bring up our samples. So the basic idea is it's down there, and if we go down there with our actual bodies, we'll die. So we need very fancy mud grabbers that grab mud with all the stuff in it in a particular way that lets us study it well. We're going to talk about this first. This is called a sledge. Holly, do you want to say some more?
So this blue thing is called an epibenthic sledge. It's a bottom trawler. So the blue frame on the sled, it slides along the bottom just like Santa's sleigh, and then it has a net, so you can kind of see in the background. The white part is a net with very tiny holes in it,
Yep.
and that collects all the microscopic worms that you couldn't get from other types of sampling equipment.
And then there are these core tubes back here. A core is just like the Earth's core. It's something jammed down in there in the middle. Holly?
Yep. So these are called megacore tubes, and so this is what I use for my research. You just push them into the mud, and then you bring up core tubes of mud, and then we slice it off. And so the worms are, again, microscopic. We put that in the freezer to do DNA sequencing, and we can also do microscopy once we bring them back up to the bottom.
So 2 basic ways we get stuff. Water goes in here, stuff gets caught in that net, and then we get mud stuff here, just like you know how you can get liquid in your straw if you put your thumb on it and then lift it up. It's a lot like that, and then we have to get stuff out of that mud. I'm going to show you the back deck really fast. This is where all the action happens, but we're not allowed out there right now because of the way the boat is moving and stabilizing. All right, Holly, take us back to that other room, and I want to show people, once we have those mud samples from the cores, which is especially what you're going to be doing, what happens to them.
All right, so here is we call this a sieve table. So this is a stacked table with different mesh sizes. So this is the biggest one on top, and the holes between the metal get smaller as you go down. So once we sample, we bring up mud from the bottom, we'll dump it on this table, and then we'll wash it with a garden hose, and that will get rid of all the grains of mud, and then the animals will be left on the top of that. And so different animals of different sizes would be on different layers, and then we'll pick those out and bring them to the microscope to look at the bodies.
And I want to show you also how all this stuff gets down in the ocean in the first place. So this is one of, I think 3 or 4 at least cranes on the ship. Basically, stuff attaches to those long ropes, and it goes, that pulley at the top lowers the cable. The whole thing swings out. So you can see that there are these joints down here on the bottom. Sorry, making sure I'm not dropping my computer. This whole thing tilts out like that. So it's in right now for transit. It'll tilt out when we get there. And so then everything will hang out over the water, and it'll just get lowered down. And the funny thing is, it takes hours for this stuff to hit the bottom sometimes if we're going really deep. So there's a lot of time when we are all just hanging out in the ship waiting, and they have these neat camera views throughout the whole ship where I can change the channel and see, this is showing us the very front of the ship right now, but I can change the channel and get information on exactly what equipment is where and what's happening with it. All right, Holly, will you open doors for me so we can go look at where we are going to live, like sleep? Oh, yeah, Holly has to get her mask. We are trying to stay COVID safe. So for the next week, everyone on board is wearing masks when we can. All right.
Virginia, I have to ask, how deep do you go?
Oh, Holly, how deep are we going with that equipment?
Yeah, on this cruise, on this expedition, we're going anywhere between 400 to 800 meters deep. So that sounds deep, but that's actually not very deep. Sometimes I sample all the way down to 5,000 meters. So this is actually relatively shallow.
So it's shallow deep sea. All right. Rescue axe, just in case. Don't plan on using that. Okay, we have a couple main hallways that run the length of the ship front to back. I'm going to pause here. These are the time changes we're going to go through. So we're going to transit through 11 time zones during the course of this expedition. 4 of them are coming in the next week. So that's going to be a fun thing to deal with. All right, this is our cabin. Welcome to our home. It's beautiful. I'm going to show you the view out our window first because it's one of my favorite things. So that's still the coast of New Zealand. We are able to speak to y'all today because we are not so far away from New Zealand yet that our internet is just the worst. I'm going to show you, I'm on the top bunk. That white bar that you see is supposed to keep me from rolling out if the waves get big enough. We have extra pillows that I can use to tilt my mattress so I can pile them under this edge so I'll be tilted toward the wall just in case. I don't know how I'm going to sleep through that, so we'll just have to see. Holly has her curtains drawn. I have those same curtains up here so you can have a nice cozy cave and we can have a little bit of privacy. One desk, a couple of cabinets, and then our shower is a little bit like a cage almost, and there's a bar in there. So if you need to grab onto something because the seas are rough, you can. Normal toilet, normal sink. I think this is actually pretty spacious compared to some other cabins I've seen on other ships. I'm going to take us back down to that room so that we can answer some questions from y'all. Back down this hallway, going toward the back of the ship again. All right, Holly, I'm going to let you open that door. Thank you, my lovely assistant, Holly. Down the stairs. The rule on a ship like this is one hand for you, one hand for the ship, because the stairs are so steep and you never know when the boat's going to rock. Thank you, Holly. And here we are back in this room right by the deck. I'm going to switch it back to us. And Jenny, if there are questions, we'd love to answer them.
Excellent. We do have a couple. Aries asks, what part of Antarctica is this? And I think they'd also like to know just like where is your cruise going? So you're leaving from New Zealand. Where do you go next?
Yep. So this cruise is in East Antarctica. So when we talk about Antarctica, we put our hand up like this. I guess I have to do this. So like this. So this is West Antarctica, the thumb of Antarctica, and then we are in East Antarctica, so we're sort of over here, and it's between, if you would go south, between New Zealand and South Africa. that's along the coast of Antarctica where we're going. So we're looking at the continental shelf, which is this really narrow strip of seafloor between the deep sea and the actual continent of Antarctica. And it's the only place in the world where the deep sea comes up to the shallow water. So there's a mixture of kind of intertidal shallow water species and also deep sea species, because the water is so cold that you can get all those worms coexisting in one place.
And are you going to go all the way up to the ice?
We are on an icebreaker, so we will be actually sailing through the ice. So the front of the ship is like a triangle, and it just goes through sea ice. But if the ice gets thicker than 3 meters, the ship can't go any thicker than that. So we can go through the ice a little bit. We won't be going to the ice shelves. That's not the type of science that we're doing, but we will be seeing icebergs and seeing ice on the side of the boat.
Oh, neat. Arthur wants to know, what is your favorite species of nematode?
It's very hard to choose. It's like picking your favorite child, which you're never supposed to do, right? My favorite worm is a worm that we nicknamed Chewbacca, and so it's a really hairy nematode that has bacteria attached to the outside of its skin. So it literally is, it looks like super furry under the microscope, but the fur is actually bacteria that coat the worm entirely.
Oh, wow. Is that its official name, the Chewbacca nematode?
No, the official name is Eubostritius, the genus of nematodes, but we call it Chewbacca for short because the other one is really complicated.
That's great. Question about the rough seas from Ivy and Aria. Do you ever fall into it when the seas are rough? And I want to ask you that.
Question.
You're traveling through. Oh, sorry. You're traveling through an ocean that is notorious for having harsh weather. So how big could the waves get?
Yeah, so you're right about it being notorious for rough weather. As Holly said, I think you said this earlier, this is the first ship funded by the U.S. government that's going to the part of Antarctica where we're going for 22 years. Mostly people go just south of South America because the passage between South America and that peninsula that was on Holly's thumb, it's much shorter than we're going. So we're actually, I think we were going to start steaming toward Antarctica today, but there's a storm, and so we're waiting. So to really answer the question though, I've already found myself, usually I stand like this. Hi, I'm a person standing. I've already found myself doing this. So 1 foot in front, 1 behind, and a little bit apart, and then you're able to wobble. However you need to wobble.
Or use the toilet.
I know, so when you sit on the toilet, you're in rough seas, you're sitting, but you've got your feet apart and you're just trying to do your best. There's also a bar that we can hang on to there if things really get rough. There are also some rough seas things that change, like we can't wash our clothes when the seas are too rough because the water will slosh out of the machines. So I've not experienced that rough seas yet. I will be happy to follow up, ask me in a year, and I'll tell you exactly how it goes.
Mary asks, how long will you be on the ship and how many scientists are on the ship with you? What other type of research is happening?
So we will be on the ship until mid-May. That's about 53 days at sea, I think. So maybe 40 to 45 for doing science. Then you have to have weather days and stuff like that. So a good long time. This is a really long expedition. Most other expeditions like this that I've heard of that go to other places in the world are maybe 40, 45 days total. So we've got a good 2.5 months for this whole trip coming up. There are 31 scientists on board, and what unites all these scientists, it's a lot like, so when we send a U.S. Olympic team to the Olympics, they don't all do the same thing. They don't all specialize in the same stuff, but they all go together and cheer each other on, and they have similar experiences while they're in the Olympic Village. It's a lot like that. These scientists don't do the same thing, but they all know, they all brought lists of things on board that they're really excited to see.
Yeah.
So if we're doing worms, if you're doing worms, and you see something that somebody else wants to study, there's like a bucket, you toss it in, and then you take it over to the other person. What unites everybody on board is a love of small things. So small squishy things, I think, really. So some people are doing different types of worms. There's a thing called a goblet worm, and it sits on the bottom and sticks up, and it has little things that look like hairs, or it's like kind of like an upside down jellyfish, and it wobbles like this. There are people that are doing sea stars and brittle stars. There are people that are doing, I think they are like tiny clams, but they don't have the shell, and they're in the very top of the mud. So a lot of people who study really small things and will yell at you about how the small things are really the best and they deserve more attention.
I love that. Arthur has a really good question. Do you have any issues with the worms bloating or changing shape due to the pressure when you bring them up? Because they're living, you said we would die if we went down that deep, but that's normal for them, right?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Worms don't have swim bladders. So the reason why things bloat and kind of explode is mostly because of the gas change. And so that's really more of a concern for fish. Worms don't really, we can actually bring them up alive. And that's what most people will be doing. They'll be looking under live worms under the microscope. So the thing that actually kills the worms is not the pressure, it is the temperature change, because the bottom of the ocean in Antarctica is just so cold that if you warm those worms up even a little bit by a few degrees, they will just like overheat and they'll die. So we have to be really careful about the temperature. We stick them into a fridge. We have a walk-in fridge on the boat, and we have really cold water that we use under the microscope. So yeah, the temperature is much more of a concern for us than the pressure change.
And speaking of temperature, there have been several questions asking how cold is it now and how cold is it going to get for you on the ship?
So right now, actually, because we're in the southern hemisphere, New Zealand where's New Zealand? It's over there now, and it's summer here. So we have been delayed going on this ship for about 2 weeks now. And so all of us brought maybe one pair of shorts and then a bunch of stuff for Antarctica. And we were all wondering how many additional pair of shorts do we need to buy so we can be comfortable in the New Zealand summer. So right now, I'm actually very comfortable, even in the high wind now that we're offshore, in just like one long sleeve shirt, and I'm wearing leggings. So I would say the temperature, I think right now is about 62 or something outside. We're going at the end of the Antarctica summer and getting into its fall. So we expect the temperatures to be around freezing, a little below Fahrenheit, but not actually much colder than that. This is why these kinds of ships are scheduled to go during this time of year especially. So when you wrote your grant, you said, please put me on the schedule for 3 or 4 years from now. Everything's so tightly scheduled because they have to protect us. And if they're sending us out into a space where we're just going to get soaked in water and then frozen for hours, that doesn't work.
Yeah, and I've been preparing for this trip kind of like I'm going skiing. So like a lot of base layers, a lot of jackets that you can put on or take off if you get cold. Yeah, so that's the way I've been thinking about it. And actually, I did bring all my base layers from my ski bag.
So will you see penguins? Charlize wants to know if you'll see penguins, and Arthur wants to know, do the worms have antifreeze in their blood? So 2 questions at once.
Do you want to do the penguins?
Sure, I'll do penguins first. I know we're both. The ship just rocked. So yes, we expect to see penguins. Neither of us have been to Antarctica before, but from what we can tell, we expect to see penguins on the ice. And we've been told that sometimes the captain has to be careful because if we're doing our icebreaker thing, we don't want to break into any penguins. So I would be delighted if we got to be close enough to them that we have to change our course a little bit because of them, because I would love to see an Antarctic penguin.
Yeah.
Antifreeze.
Yeah, so the worms that I work on don't have blood. So some species have antifreeze, but the ones I work on, they may have some molecules which stop them from freezing, but actually they're okay with cold temperatures and they don't necessarily need the antifreeze proteins like the fish would. And fun fact, we can actually freeze the worms and thaw them out and they'll still stay alive. So we think there's something molecular happening that's interesting that helps them survive freezing, and it's not a big deal for worms as it would be for a fish.
That is really cool. There are several questions as well just about logistics on the ship. So Elia wants to know what you do in your spare time. Bronwyn wants to know, what do you eat? Because you can't go to the grocery store, right? And then Aria wants to know, where do you put your garbage?
Okay, we've got spare time eating garbage. Yep. I'm going to make sure I answer each one. So spare time. Honestly, there is not nearly as much spare time as you think. I know I said that we have to wait for hours for stuff to get to the bottom, but when the equipment comes out, it's like everyone is on duty for hours. So I think we switch into day and night shifts, and each shift is 12 hours once we start sampling, because you never know what time of day or night is the right time to drop something in the water, or when things will be coming up, just based on how the seas are, how the ice is. It's so unpredictable. Yeah. So there's not a ton of spare time, but I will tell you that in case there is a break, because everybody needs a break sometimes, we brought books. There is a huge library of both books and movies here. There are board games. I like doing little math worksheets, so I brought like little logic puzzles.
Nerd.
I know, I like my math. Gosh, I don't know what else. People just bring whatever they want to bring.
TV, movies, music. There was a game night last night.
Yes.
But I would say spare time. So for me, I'm the scientist in charge of 5 people. And so it's kind of like, when you go on vacation and you have everything in your suitcase, but then once you get there to the hotel room, you're like, oh my God, where's my swimsuit? Where's my toothbrush? And so we have 7 days until we start getting mud, and it's frantically like, put that microscope there. We need some plastic bags, and it's like a lot of kind of going on vacation and getting yourself set up for a new routine, and that's consumed all of my time for the last 24 hours since we've gone on this boat.
Yeah. Okay, so that was spare time. We have eating. There's actually a team of chefs, of cooks on this ship, and they've been serving us really nice food. So I think the major challenge is, once we get away from shore, eventually you need to have a way for things not to go bad, because we're at sea so much, there are no resupplies. So like 55 days from now, we will have to be eating the food that is already on the ship. So they have really good freezers and refrigerators. So far, the things we've had a salad bar every day. We had like Cajun fish, I think. We had roasted vegetables. There's an ice cream freezer.
Yep.
We have milk in boxes, so we'll be able to have milk the whole time because those box milks stay good. It's been, actually, I really like having somebody make me excellent food.
Yep.
I really loved it.
And then we have snacks. So we have like the instant noodles, and we have microwave popcorn. So if we want a late night snack with a movie, there's a whole like snack bar that we can go raid, potato chips, everything like that.
Yes. So there was spare time, there was eating, and I have 100% forgotten the other
Garbage.
option. Garbage. Okay. So there are a couple of different types of trash cans around the boat. The best thing for the environment is to burn stuff so that we're not releasing anything into the environment down there. It's so sensitive. So the ship has an incinerator where we burn trash in a way that takes care of it. There are some things that we cannot burn, like cans that would explode or batteries. I think those we pack out. So if you've heard the term pack out when you're taking a hike, if we bring it down here, we got to bring it back because it's just the right thing to do.
Yep. So my hairspray, once it runs out, I have to hand it to someone special, and they can't burn it or else the can will explode.
Yeah. So that'll be going to Cape Town.
Yeah.
In South Africa.
So hopefully I won't use that much hairspray.
Yeah.
And I know you touched on this before, but remind me again, just really quick, the size of the ship. How many people, how many scientists? And it's all scientists on this ship and the support crew for them, right?
Yes. So there are 3 groups of people. There's the scientists, so the people who who asked for money and got it. There's science crew, so people who are contracted with a different organization to help the science things happen, and they do tech, and they do like basic weather monitoring. They run a lot of machines. And then there's ship crew, who are classified as like mariners, and that's like the captain and the people who make the ship run, the engineers.
The cook.
Yeah, the ship. Yes, the cooks. So there, I think, are 30 science people. There's about 15 or 20 of the science crew, and like actually we're still seeing crew members we've never seen before. So we think there are probably like maybe 60 people on this ship, if I had to guess. The ship is about 200 feet long, so not the size of a football field, but not that much shorter than that either. It's a pretty big ship. It does not look like a cruise ship at all. So you think about the high walls on a cruise ship. Our back deck is really low so that we can access the water really easily for dropping stuff over the side.
No bathing suits. We all have to wear hard hats and long pants.
Yes. And the back deck gets covered in mud when we do all the sampling stuff. So we got issued special pants and coats and waterproof stuff so that when we're working out on the back, we don't get, thanks for the follow. We don't get too cold or wet.
And we always have to wear hard hats when we're outside, when they're putting equipment down, because it's really dangerous. There's lots of heavy equipment and it goes really fast. So we have to, safety first is our first priority.
Yes, and everyone who's putting equipment over the side has to have a rope tied around their middle so that if a wave comes over that we don't expect and washes them, they're not going to get washed away. They're just going to get washed off.
Gotcha. I know we're getting almost to the end of the time that you have for us, but I want to return to just a couple more questions about worms because we had some great ones. Zoe would like to know, are there any poisonous worms? Are there any nematodes that you're studying that could be dangerous?
No, you know what? I don't think there are any poisonous nematodes at all. They don't have venom. Roundworms generally don't. They're not toxic. Those are different types of worms. There are parasitic nematodes that parasitize like salmon. Occasionally, I have friends that send me pictures. They're like eating salmon and they find a worm. They're like, "What is this?" That's a parasitic nematode called Anisakis. So mostly it's parasites of humans, mammals, pets, but not toxic.
And Arthur wants to know, what could you learn or are hoping to learn about worms that might help humans in the future?
Yeah, so the most famous nematode is Caenorhabditis elegans, which is C. elegans. It's a model nematode. It's used in biomedical research. And actually, so nematodes have the same pathways as we do in our brain. So C. elegans, that model nematode, is used for Alzheimer's research, Parkinson's research. So the motor neurons and some of the neural pathways are the same in these little tiny worms as they are humans. So they're really important medical research animal.
That is really cool. And then the worms that you're studying on the seafloor, like there's a lot that you can learn about the environment down there, right? And with the cores, are you able to look back in time when you do the cores to look at what worms were living back in time? Do you do that, or just looking at living worms?
We could look back in time if we wanted to. So the DNA is preserved. We would just have to use slightly different things, slightly different protocols in the lab. I look at the living worms, so I'm interested in what's down there right now, but they can tell us things about evolution. So we're really interested, like the deep sea is a place that's really remote and cold and dark, and there's not a lot of food down there. So one of the big questions we're asking is how are there so many worms down there? That it makes no sense, right? There's no food and it's cold, and why would you want to live there? So they'll teach us things about all the other worms in other parts of the planet by understanding how they've adapted to these really specialized ecosystems.
And if worms are really, really everywhere, like we know they are, we better understand them so that we can understand the planet and help where we need to.
Yep.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And I love that there are still legitimate mysteries to solve, right?
Yeah. Oh,
So-
yes.
Yep. Too many, in fact. So you should come help us solve them because I need some help.
Now, there are more questions going by in the chat than we have time to answer, but Virginia told me right before we started a couple fabulous things. One, you have a WhatsApp group that will send regular updates. It's just a free, while they have internet, you'll get a daily update about research on the ship. And then two, Virginia has an email address, and if you have a question you really want answered, because she's there as a science communicator, you can send a message to her and she will reply as long as the internet lasts. So I'm going to have our moderator put both of those links in the chat. And then last, I know I keep saying last question and I give you one more, but I promise.
This is what our life is like. I totally understand.
We have had several questions just saying, what was your career path / I love marine biology. I want to be a marine biologist. And I know that's a really big question, but just real quick, what advice would you give to a kid who sees this interview and thinks, oh man, I want to do something like that when I grow up? How could they be a researcher that helps the ocean and understands the world around us?
You want to go first?
Yeah, so I can talk. So I'm a research professor, right? I do this for my full-time job. The advice I always give people who want to do a marine biology career, if you want to get a PhD and be a researcher like me, you should stay as broad as possible. So even if you're really excited about the ocean and you want to do marine science, chemistry, math, you got to take those courses. I'm not like the biggest fan of doing math in my spare time, but I still had to take those courses and pass them. And that broad background is really important because science nowadays is really interdisciplinary. So I work with computer scientists and physical oceanographers and chemists, and I need to be able to speak their language. So having that broad biological background when you are in high school and in college and even beyond, if you do a PhD and go on to do postdoc, having a broad understanding of biology is really important, and it will help you in your career path if you want to go into research.
I have two pieces of advice that I usually give to people. Number one, I grew up in Kentucky. There are no oceans in Kentucky. And so my advice starts with, if you like something, there are ways to do it, especially you can find ways to get financial help doing it. So there are often now scholarships to bring people to the ocean so you can try things out. There are internships, there are fellowships. So if you like something, don't give up and go with that. And then my second piece of advice is always try things out. So I am not a researcher, but I am a marine biologist using my marine biology skills in a different way. And I was meant for this career path. I love, love, love connecting y'all fine folks with stuff like this. And so when I volunteered at a wildlife sanctuary, I was like, oh, I don't want to be a zookeeper. I want to be answering the questions. And then when I was doing research and answering questions, I was like, wait, but who's going to use the questions to make the world better? And then now here I am trying to connect people with information that they can use to make the world better. So try things out. Keep that open, broad background and an open mind. And just don't give up. If you love this, find a way to do something like this. We are not in it for the money, and it is just so amazingly fulfilling to get up and be like, this is my job and I feel privileged to do it.
Yeah, and I would just add, there's a lot of career paths that can lead you to being on a boat in Antarctica.
Yes.
So, for example, the IT person that helped us set this this live stream up, he actually was an EMT, so he was like an ambulance driver, and then he decided he didn't want to do that, so he got into like basically computer science and coding and like data science, and then he's our IT person on the boat, right? So he's not even a researcher, but he gets to go to these really cool places. So just if you know you want to be on a boat, there's many ways to get there, and just figure out what you're excited about and passionate about, and that passion is going to sustain you through all the chemistry courses that you may or may not have to take.
Awesome. Well, I am so glad that you were able to spend time with us today to answer these questions. Again, there are links in the chat, and I will put them into the description. So if you would like to contact Virginia with questions, you can. And if you'd like to get daily updates on their journey, you can as well. And I'm looking forward to just following along with your journey and hearing about what you discover. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us. And bye, everybody. So nice to meet y'all.
Bye.
I will end with the dance.